this multi-employer bargaining, hundreds of thousands of Australians won't have jobs to pay for it.
More strikes and less jobs.
The possibility of going back to the 1970s, where we have widespread industrial action right across entire industries.
We're still not clear on how businesses can get out of it.
The Albanese government came to office last year saying it wanted to end the conflict around industrial relations and seek more cooperation with business. But there was still business resistance to some of the industrial relations reforms it moved through the federal parliament last year, particularly the so-called multi-employer bargaining system, which began a few weeks ago.
Let's not forget all the predictions last year of widespread coast-to-coast strikes.
As far as the minister's claims are concerned, he's certainly right that the sky hasn't fallen in. He's right to say that there have been perceptible changes around wage outcomes, but what the long-term effects are going to be of Labor's first big round of changes, we'll still have to wait and see. What they were effectively doing is giving employers greater incentives to bargain and greater reason to reach an outcome.
Now Burke is embarking on a new round of reforms which will be introduced into the Parliament when it returns next week. In a speech at the National Press Club today, he was keen to point out that reforms to date have not caused the industrial mayhem predicted by critics.
How many days were lost to industrial action for the last quarter of the previous government? 128,000. So think about that, 128,000 days lost to industrial action. We've got the figures for the most recent quarter for this government. Not 128,000, 7,700 days lost to industrial action. The result of the legislation is exactly what we had argued it would be.
But there are already campaigns underway against some of the new round of changes.
Same job, same pay takes your reward for your experience away.
The so-called same job, same pay proposals are just one of 6 reforms Tony Burke will introduce to Parliament next week. They include measures to deal with wage theft, putting a criminal penalty in place for employers who steal people's wages, and to address casualisation of the workforce. The legislation also aims to deal with workers in what is known as the gig economy, everything from Uber drivers to NDIS carers.
It's $10 or $9 per hour is not enough.
At issue is the status of workers employed through platforms like Uber, who are technically regarded as self-employed. They have no rights to things like superannuation, no real links with the body that pays them. There was a lot of focus last year on the plight of food delivery drivers being wildly underpaid under this system. But the debate has morphed in recent months. One of the government's biggest concerns isn't about delivery workers, but people who care for some of our most vulnerable. The exploding labour market for carers in the National Disability Insurance Scheme has come to be dominated by a number of web-based platforms on which potential carers can gain work.
In the last 10 years since the advent of the NDIS, one of the kind of fastest growing ways that you can find support is via an online platform, and many of those platforms expect their workers to work via an ABN, which looks very similar to work practices across the rest of the gig economy.
A lot of people, if you're not involved in the aged care sector or the NDIS directly, you won't realise how much of this is now being delivered through the gig economy.
We're seeing this enormous shift across the care economy where workers are being moved from relatively secure work, both casual and part-time, to insecure work on these contract gig platforms.
The government is trying to achieve something that has eluded regulators around the world to date, a way of putting some floor under the pay and conditions of workers in the gig economy without affecting the flexibility that online marketplaces like Uber offer both workers and customers.
There's effectively 3 things that the Fair Work Commission will look at. Do you have low bargaining power? Do you have low levels of control over the work that you do? And finally, are you being paid low wages in the sense that less than what you would get if you were being employed as an employee?
The government will do this by giving the Fair Work Commission flexible powers to define what will be called employee-like work. It would not involve setting terms like overtime rates, but it would be able to consider things like the time it takes for workers to be paid.
Low bargaining power, low control, low pay. If you look at those features, that tells you who's going to be employee-like. And once you look at it that way, businesses like Mabel come in, businesses like Airtasker fall out.
Mabel is one of the platforms providing workers to the aged care and disability sectors. Its co-founder, Peter Scutt, says his platform shouldn't be included in the new system.
I think we're a little bit perplexed by some of the things the Minister said today, particularly in relation to Mabel being considered part of the gig economy and employee-like, when independent contractors on Mabel are in complete control of the services they deliver and to whom and the price of those services. So we would say they have, high autonomy, high bargaining power, and they earn on average more than comparable employees.
Many platforms, perhaps most platforms, won't come anywhere near qualifying for this new system. And they won't because they're not controlling the work that's done. They're not controlling how much workers are being paid. No doubt that the Minister signalled today that he expected that lower paid, lower skilled care workers will be able to fall within this new system. But whether that will actually prove to be the case, we're going to have to wait and see.
Jordan O'Reilly also runs a web-based employment platform called HireUp in the disability sector. But unlike platforms like Mabel, with which he competes, the workers who use his platform are actually employees.
In this sector, you've got a particularly kind of vulnerable workforce. It's a very highly feminised workforce. It's relatively low paid historically, and it's a high migrant population working in the care sector. What we understand that the government is saying is that no matter how you choose to work in the care economy, you should be entitled to the minimum rights, entitlements and protections that any other worker enjoys, no matter how they're engaged.
It's possible the proposed reforms don't go as far as a web-based employer like Jordan O'Reilly would like. But while the debate about the government's proposals unfolds, the exploding costs of the NDIS give the government another reason to try to fix the labour market which services it.
The flexibility will work for a whole lot of people and you can still have the flexibility. But our objective is to fund services for people with disabilities and to fund services for people who are aged. That's the objective. It's not to make money for a platform that is underpaying workers.